Blue Room's the only other place, but there's money for it. I'm sure there's
I'll have to check.
I'm sure there is.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. It looks like we've got a lively crowd. So if I could have your attention, we're going to stand and say the pledge first, and then we'll get started with our meeting. Thank you.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Phil's here. Do you want him to?
Can you just get me on the meeting thing?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, let me
Lost 2
start.
pounds since you were here last.
By having everybody calm down, the school teacher's coming out at me. We've got a lot to cover today. And we've got a lot of public comments here too. So let me introduce people here. We've got Clark Schroeder, who's our manager. We've got Commissioner Huxley, myself, Commissioner Gold, Commissioner Boyce, Council Huddle, and John Jesuit, who is our administrative assistant. So, moving on. Are there any amendments to the agenda?
Madam Chair, if I may, I have a couple.
Okay, wait just a minute. I got to find my pen.
Here's an extra pen.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Go ahead.
I propose that we consider moving the item number 13, executive session, into general session so that we can have available people that want to participate, in particular the elected officials and other department leaders. Any negotiating that we would do would be withheld till we can do a executive session, but I want to pull it out of ES and put it available for the public so we can have full transparency on this, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm going to defer to Clark Schroeder on this.
Yeah, so my recommendation for that is that we go into an executive session, but we invite the department heads and managers to the executive session.
But we have some potential conflicts of interest here, and I think that's of interest to the public. And I can speak to that now. There's 3 questions that I think are very pertinent to this entire process, and I think I can offer those questions now, and I think that would be good for the public to know, not just the department heads.
Well, typically when
I know typically, but
we're doing
this
labor
is...
negotiations are in executive
So you want to
session.
forego possible conflict of interest? We need to get that before the public.
I wouldn't say I want to forego conflict of interest. What I'm saying is in labor negotiations or in executive session and the managers
fine.
can come in.
But we have something that's led up to potential conflicts of interest here between Commissioner Huxley and the attorney, Bruce Bischoff. So I think that needs to go before the public, and I have some comments on it.
If there's a legal issue, I think we would want to defer to our counsel to decide if there is a conflict of interest. I'm not sure if this issue's been addressed or not. Counsel?
So is there a conflict of interest here with the likelihood that Mr. Bischoff has legally represented Mr. Huxley in the past?
Again, I think that's something that's been reviewed before, and the opinion was no, and so I can go back. If you would have talked to me before now, I probably could have gone over my notes and looked at it and things like that, but really, I think that question has been considered and explained.
I don't know when. I've never heard it discussed before in an executive session or otherwise.
Okay. Well, I think I can explain that to you, some other time, but bottom line is there was a motion, there's been no second, and so I think there can be no discussion on a motion without a second.
So your position is that it is not a conflict of interest?
My position is that my recollection from looking at it earlier was that there was not a conflict of interest. I don't have the support.
So may I ask another question then, sir?
I think we should get on with the agenda.
So, Madam Chair,
Yes.
in the interest of changing the agenda, the confusion we have here is enough reason in itself to walk away from the labor negotiations and discuss if there is a conflict of interest here. And there's a couple additional questions that relate to that. And I can offer you those questions if you allow me, Madam Chair.
You're still talking about taking that out of executive session and putting in general meeting, right?
Yes, we owe that to the public.
Okay, why don't you make a motion, and if you get a second, then we'll vote on that.
Before I make that motion, I'd like to offer the other two questions, which I think are pertinent to how you might vote them.
Okay?
Has Commissioner Huxley, and possibly you perhaps, had inside information or an unfair advantage over the other commissioners in any SEIU negotiations?
I had inside information?
I'm asking you, yes, ma'am.
No, I
Okay.
haven't had anything to do with it.
Thank you very much for that clarification. But we know that through the invoices that Mr. Bischoff has offered, that Commissioner Huxley has had some participation in, apparently, it's hard to say that we've had negotiations, but there's been a lot of discussion. The bill is presently, Madam Chair, up to, if you add in the 3 weeks of July, is potentially up to 16, 18, maybe even 20,000 on the bill. And we've got nothing that we put on the table for the SEIU negotiations. No offer. So that's the second question. So if Commissioner Huxley has had inside information and involvement in the negotiations, I see that as another conflict of interest and an improper role. And I was not offered any kind of information. And apparently you were not either. Is that correct?
That's correct, but
Okay.
I think that's what the executive session is all about, to get all the information out on the table.
Well, I'd like to have the public see all the information out on the public, on the table. So the third question is, did anyone initially or even recently consult with the other department heads on how we might avoid this potential strike and how they might be able to contribute and offer help in solving the problem?
Actually, the department heads are going to be invited to the executive session and speak their mind.
Yeah, only because I insisted, but
Well-
that could be in a public context, and that would be my recommendation. So I'm asking you, I will make that motion now, Madam Chair, and look for a second. That
Is
motion
there a
is
second?
to bring the item 1113 out of executive session and discuss these three questions in particular so the public can be advised of what we're dealing with here.
Is there a second? Hearing no second, it does not pass.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move from consent item 4.
I'm not done.
Oh, you have something else?
Thank you. Item number 11, the compliance on the travel policy. At this late moment, we still don't know if it's 4,000 or 6,000 that was over the travel budget. And according to the information you have here, Administrator Schroeder, you'll have that August 31st. I want to know why that's even on the agenda today when we don't have that information. Why wouldn't we delay that? I mean, unless you have updated as of this morning or even yesterday afternoon.
So this is I'm just seeking direction for when this becomes final to go down this direction, in addition to basically enacting enforcement on violations of the travel policy itself.
So, Madam Chair, my motion is until we have those figures. The credit card is, 103 this month so far, and none was charged against that card in June. So it's not complicated to figure out where we stand on that so we can have a precise number. So therefore, my motion is to delay or table until, as you recommend, late August when you'll have that information, or as soon as we can get it.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion? It was my understanding that we're going to talk about the policy and direction for Mr. Schroeder, so.
It would be nice to have that information available in a proper package. So you're going to do the consent calendar now? Thank you.
Yes, item 4F, appoint 2 members to the Coos Curry Housing Authority. 1 member has withdrawn their application, so we need to move that to the regular agenda since the write-up has just 1 member. So we're just going to move that to
Right before
under
five.
yeah, so it'll be 6C then, administrative actions appointments.
6C.
Yes.
Are there any other additions or corrections for the agenda?
Did you have any other comments?
Okay, so, yes. Commissioner Huxley?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to pull for discussion out of consent items 4B, as in boy, and 4E.
B and E. Okay, how about this? Can we just put them right after the consent calendar? Would that be okay? So we'll put...
But you moved the other one into 6. I mean, it doesn't make...
Well, that's administration
Okay.
actions and
That's
appointments.
fine.
So.
I mean, that's your call.
Okay, so we'll put 4B. And 4E. Was it 4E you wanted?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, down here. Okay, are there any other agenda amendments?
Let's see. On item 4I, the retainer agreement, it just needs, as to reference, you'll need a somebody's going to have signature authority, because there's only, I think, only one signature line on that one.
Oh, okay.
So there just have to be a reference to who is going to have signature authority.
Okay, any other amendments?
No.
Hearing none, I'm looking for a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
And would that be, that's just approve the agenda, we're not at the consent calendar yet.
Exactly.
Thanks,
No.
all right.
I would approve the agenda as amended up to this point in discussions.
Okay. Next, we've got public comments.
Is that a vote?
We won't vote.
Oh, sorry about that. Any further discussion? I'll second that. Call for the question?
Aye.
No.
Aye. Okay, next we've got public comments, and we've got quite a number of public comments, so we're going to be very, very strict on the amount of time that you have. 2 rules. Be brief and respectful. If you see that someone's talking about the same thing as you are and so forth, I'd be happy if you decline to come up, but that's up to you. Okay, Mary Rowe.
I'm Mary Rowe. I'm a former commissioner on the Coos Curry Housing Authority, and I'm here to speak about appointments to that board. We need for all 4 of our commissioner positions to be filled to have adequate representation. There are challenges on the Housing Authority. The monthly board meetings are currently in North Bend, whereas half of them used to be in Curry County. I learned during my year on the Housing Authority that participating in the board meetings only by speakerphone is inadequate. Curry County needs to have some board meetings here, even if some of the Housing Authority staff have to participate by speakerphone. Also, a few categories of program participants on the waiting list used to be prioritized, but no longer are due to the staff time required for processing. But it is a matter of life or death for at least one of these former groups to be prioritized again: homeless people. Only about 15% of those given housing choice vouchers find rentals. We have a housing shortage, and the voucher application process is tough. When I was a commissioner, I recommended that the Housing Authority train partner organizations that can assist applicants. The Housing Authority's orientation meetings for Curry program participants need to remain in Curry. I also fought for that. Karen Gill-Martin has spoke up repeatedly for some of the board meetings to be in Curry County, and for commissioners to be better informed about Housing Authority functions. And Karen asks questions and makes suggestions. At a time when the city manager of Bandon, the manager of Banner Bank, and the City of Brookings Public Works and Development Services Director have recently been appointed to this board, a board which is, according to the bylaws, to be made up of people with different types of experiences, Karen, who is a teacher, gives a different perspective and knowledge to the board that is invaluable. Please appoint Karen Gill-Martin. Could you do some creative outreach to fill the other board position? Perhaps Jane Stebbins would help by writing an article. Thank you.
Thank you. Jaden Richards.
Good morning, I'm Jaden Richards. I live in the harbor section of Brookings, and I just want to preface it by saying that I live with a great group of neighbors, a very caring group who do a lot for others by mowing each other's yards, fixing meals if someone is ill from the hospital, etc. It's a good group of people.
Maybe one of them would like to move close to me.
Pardon me? Oh, the issue that I'm going to speak to is the house behind me that I believe has become, it has several issues, but my concern about it is the health standard. It appears that the owner of this house does not have trash service, and trash has been piled up sky high all over the carport, the yard, and what has happened from this is there's now rats, cockroaches, etc., leaving from their area and coming into our homes. My next door neighbor, it was the middle of the night, and she had a rat in her bedroom that had come in through the garage. We have tried talking with this owner to no avail. The police have been out there many, many times, not for that issue, but for another that someone else is going to speak upon. I guess I'm trying to find out if we are on a list apparently with the health department to see if there can be an inspection made of some sort. I would even be willing, if they would allow me to possibly pay for trash service so that the trash could be cleaned up. I don't know what we're going to do, but it's a threat. We also have, a lot of us are, seniors, older neighbors that can't fight rats, and it's terrifying. It is a large group of homeless people. I'm not against homeless. We're just asking for a little bit of respect. We have tried to respect them, and we're just asking if they and the, I guess, owner of the house could respect us by just trying to just abide by commonalities. Again, I said law enforcement, health department, trash, recycle, others have been called many times as we try to get help to rid this situation. Rid of loss is what we can do, and feel helpless as these non-law-abiding, non-tax-paying people destroy our neighborhood. We are all taxpayers and seem to have no rights as these people take over our neighborhood knowing that they can. The owner will not listen to any of us as we try on our own to rectify the situation. Thank you.
Okay, just to let you know, we're in the process of trying to get a code enforcement officer that would be coming down and looking at these issues. But
that would certainly help. And if there's any situation where someone could volunteer along with that person, I mean, I don't know. I know it's brand new. It's not in action yet, but I'd like to explore that.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Just a
Commissioner
question.
Huxley?
Could you specify the address, please?
Sure. It's 97817 Crestline Loop.
97817
Crestline.
Crestline?
Crestline Loop.
That's a pretty nice neighborhood.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
These are my neighbors.
I have
Some of my
friends
neighbors.
down there. Okay, thank you. Mary J. Chianchetti? I came close.
I'm Mary Jo Carichetti. We've lived across the street from this house for 12 years, and most of them have been a nightmare. First, it was a pit bull that ran loose, ripped up the whole neighborhood, killed a beloved pet of ours on our front porch. Now there's pit bull people living there. It's a nightmare. There's loud, screaming, cursing, threatening voices of men and women day and night. This has been going on for 3 years. Taunting, teasing, scaring anyone who has seen. One of them came after me with a chain pulled between his hands. Now, I'm behind the house across the street from him. And I yelled, "Get off my property." I had my hose. He just came, sat on my porch. They're not in their right mind. There's tents, garbage. Again, I don't want to cover something that somebody else. So this is what's going on with me and my family. It is not safe to put out the trash, walk to the mailbox, or anywhere else after dark. It is not safe to walk around the block at any time. It is not safe for any pet, cats, or dogs to be outside anytime. Parked cars are not safe, even in driveways. These people have been in my driveway looking in our cars. If somebody comes over, even a repairman, they're checking it out. They have a beautiful dog, looks like a Doberman of some sort, mix, that they let loose in people's yards, and then they say they're looking for the puppy and go after it. They've been way back in my front yard, backyard, anytime, day and night. we've spent a lot of money trying to rectify this. Again, I'm not going to overpass on someone else, but you know what? It's really not fair. We're embarrassed to have company. All of us suffer. All of us, and this is only like about a third of the people, because this screaming starts and we don't know if this is the time somebody is going to get killed. It started over 3 years ago when they attacked a neighbor that worked at the prison. He came home from work, got out of his car, they saw the badge, I hate cops. It started there. The police, I have to say, they're really stepping up, and they're there all the time, but nobody can do anything. And I have to tell you something. I was a foster kid that got let go at 18 in the streets of LA. I know street people. We're not dealing with that here, or homeless people. We're dealing with people that have severe mental issues, and they're threatening. And I really hope that you guys can do something for us, because my kids can't visit. You know what I mean? Nobody wants, it's scary. And we have a right to walk around the block.
Just to let you know, we are working on this issue. We can't do it all at once simply because of funding, but I empathize with you. It's not easy. Okay, Gordon Clay. Whoa.
Commissioner Gold, Boyce, and Huxley. For the record, my name is Gordon Clay. I've been a suicide prevention advocate in Brookings, Oregon for at least 5 years, encouraging people to reach out for help. I woke up this morning with the highest blood pressure I've had in a long time, 152/84. My consternation stems from an email I received July 14th. I'll read part of it, quote, "Just a couple of weeks ago, I got a call from a friend in crisis. I will use the name Pat for convenience. Pat had previously been told by a counselor that perhaps Pat should see a doctor who might prescribe lithium or something similar. On the day of the crisis, when Pat called me, Pat was weeping and barely coherent. Before 9 a.m., I accompanied Pat to pick up the counselor's notes, thinking that they might be helpful. The counselor's office was certain that Pat could go to Curry Community Health, especially since they had walk-in appointments. At Curry Community Health, Pat was told that they only take Oregon Health Care Plan patients during the walk-in hours, but that they were certain that Curry Medical Center would be able to help, and they would have the right person available to prescribe the medication. At urgent care at Curry Medical, Pat was able to respond to the doctor when asked, "How can I help?" Pat responded in a very small voice, "I don't want to die." Pat was told that there was no one there that could help, but they were certain that Curry Hospital in Gold Beach would be able to help. At Curry Hospital in Gold Beach, Pat was told again that there was no one there that could help, but they were sure that Bay Area Hospital in Coos Bay could help. At 5 p.m., we got to Bay Area Hospital in Coos Bay. Pat was assessed by a social worker who said a doctor would be in to see Pat. After 5 hours of waiting, Pat wanted to go home. We arrived at Brookings after midnight. A very discouraging experience. The obvious question is, why aren't the mental health and general health practitioners knowledgeable about who exactly can provide help? Why would any provider who sees a person in actual crisis send that person on their way without definitely knowing that help is at the next stop? Should a person in crisis be ever sent away? Unquote. According to Curry County law enforcement, they have been involved in 96 suicide subjects and 26 mental subjects and no suicides in 182 days. According to state records, we've only had 2 suicides since May 1. How can our healthcare system be so ill-informed? 9 months ago, I put on a symposium on suicide with the top 10 stakeholders in the county to prevent this sort of thing. It feels like all of the suicide prevention I and others have done in this county is all for naught. It drives me crazy.
Mr. Clay, can I get a copy of what you just read, please?
Yes, I've got all the data right here.
Thank you.
Gordon, just to let you know,
You're submitting this for the record?
Yes.
Are these duplicates? Are these one for each?
One for each person.
Very good.
there are other people concerned with this very issue. So you're not alone.
That's true.
Thank you. This is what you read there. Okay.
Thank you.
Is there another one?
Can you,
Oh, I've got it.
Can you get that to JJ so it goes in our record as well as to you? Thank
Here's
you.
one for Clark. Okay, David Barnes.
I'm David Barnes. I just want to, I've missed a few meetings now, but I just want to express my disappointment that once again there's nothing on this agenda that goes to improving the quality of life of the residents of Curry. There's nothing that goes to improving the revenue of Curry County. Once again, it's all appointments of people who are leaving and pretty much another do-nothing agenda. I look to the end of it, and once again, you're prosecuting Commissioner Boyce for abuse of the travel policy when he was out doing his job as a county commissioner, attending fire meetings when neither one of you other commissioners even bothered to show up. You know, Commissioner Gold, you told us you phoned it in a couple times. Commissioner Huxley was nowhere to be seen, and now you want to go after Commissioner Boyce for going out there and doing his job and representing our county. I just think that's shameful. You know, especially in light of the fact that when you were presented with irrefutable evidence of Commissioner Huxley's breach of your own rules of conduct, you'll do nothing to do anything about that, but yet you're prosecuting Commissioner Boyce for violation of another one of your policies. To me, that's just hypocritical, and you ought to just put this matter to bed right now. Either prosecute Commissioner Huxley for violation of the rules of decorum or drop this matter against Commissioner Boyce. Otherwise, you're just arbitrary and capricious, and really what you're doing, quite frankly, is very hypocritical. So, thank you.
Denise Steinbrenner. Is Denise here? Okay.
Hello, my name is Denise Steinbrenner. I am also talking about 97817 Crestline Loop. We live right next door to this residence, and there is so much garbage that it is clear from the back of the yard all the way out to almost the street. It is totally ridiculous. And we also have the problem with the rats. There's been stealing, and last week we had a tarp taken out of the back of our pickup with a camper shell on the back. We weren't at home at the time. The next morning we looked and it was gone. We did report it, and that's as far as we went there. There's fighting in the streets constantly, yelling and screaming from morning till night, sometimes all through the night, yelling and screaming very early in the morning, 3 o'clock, 3 a.m., 4 a.m. in the morning, waking everyone up around the neighborhood. There's a lot of drinking going on, drugs going on. We have reported 2 of the vehicles that we have seen hand-to-hand on drugs. Yeah, we just would really like to have something taken care of. It is totally ridiculous. My daughter, I have 4 grandkids. My daughter is not allowing my grandkids to come to the house because of this problem. There's swearing constantly. They just love that F word, and my daughter does not want my grandkids around all of that.
So I have 2 questions.
Yes,
How many
ma'am.
individuals are living there, approximately?
You know, it varies. It comes and goes.
Okay,
Yes.
and then the second question is, do you
Commissioner
know
Gold.
who the owner of the property is?
Yes, we do. Yes, yes.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Then what I would suggest, you report that to the administrator, and then we'll have more ammunition, so to speak.
Okay, we have called and we have talked to Boys Court, and we had sent him pictures and stuff of the backyard and everything, and we have reported this to him as well. It's probably been 2 to 3 months ago.
Okay.
So he has all the pictures of the backyard. I mean, there's an old toilet back there, and there's tents a lot of times that they sleep out in the front yard, in the backyard. They let their dogs just run wild. They do not chain them up or anything. There's constantly barking, yelling at the dogs.
So is this a piece of property that's undeveloped?
No.
There is actually a house there.
It's a house that
I have something to add.
is
Okay.
very damaged.
Mr. Schroeder?
Okay, so I'm aware of this issue, and I obviously just got here 6 weeks ago, but the ordinance that created this position for the county administrator, basically, one of the things I'm charged with is enforcing all the ordinances, orders, rules, regulations, procedures, and policies that are adopted by the board and the administrator. So I basically am developing a procedure and a policy, basically, that will direct not only myself but also our code enforcement officer. I would like to be able to take action on this, to basically issue a citation and go down and investigate this, so we can get the ball rolling on this. And then basically working with Councilor Huddle to make sure that what we're doing is in the right steps. So I'm basically in the steps of creating a flow chart for how we're going to address this issue. Your property, obviously, or your concern is not the only one in the county that has these concerns, and there's a lot of things out there that are going to be on this list. But we do need to develop this flow chart and start the process.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Yes. One more thing. There's always ambulance there to take somebody out of the house there. I mean, it's at least 2 times a month, if not more, of the ambulance coming. So there's a lot of drugs and stuff going on as well. And I don't know if that's the problem or if it's something else.
Okay, thank you for
Hang
bringing
on,
it to our attention.
please.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you very much. And if I may, I feel terrible for what you are dealing with. It seems to almost be an epidemic, in particular South County and the Harbor area. Thank you very much for your previous correspondence and your photos. And I think you're here today because I'd encourage you to bring your group and testify on this. The legal process is very detailed, but we have made, Councilor Huddle in a combined effort has made tremendous progress. And right now our best estimate without a code enforcement officer is to be able to hopefully do 1 or 2 of these properties per year. That's not fast enough to suit me, but it is some movement forward, and it certainly goes to our livability here in this county, and part of our economic health and development is keeping people interested in moving to Curry County, something that we have different here. And this goes against that entire, that whole reason that we live here. And again, I'm very sorry, and we'll just be committed to following through. And I made this statement and got cuffed a little bit that we need 2 enforcement officers, and I hope that in the next 2.5 years that I'm on this board that we will be able to fund that and justify that and make progress towards that. You'll see some, yes. And we have so many issues like, I understand. Somebody in your backyard is somebody in your backyard is so appalling to me, and 10 years ago we wouldn't have been having this discussion. And that's where we're headed, and that's why we have to react and respond in a very, very responsible way.
Okay, we're going to have to cut
I'm
you
not
off.
done.
Well,
Thank you.
We've got 30
One
minutes.
more
for
thing. So
public
one
comment.
thing you'll learn on this board in 18 months, we're on a spending spree here, something that I can't stop. We're spending our money in the wrong, ill-advised, improper areas, and
I
so
think we're
hopefully
off
that
the
will
issues.
change.
Let's move on.
We can
Okay,
work
Brian
more
Little?
towards your group.
You're up next.
Excuse
Oh,
me.
10:30 hearing?
gonna
Okay,
make
we've
a
got
real
to do
quick
the
comment.
10:30 hearing.
As a sheriff, I hear your complaints. We've been out there a lot of times, but I'm going to tell you what I will do is I will make sure that we have deputies in the area a lot more whenever they can to make contact with this house, see what we can do to, you know, there's a lot of times that there's not things we can do because there hasn't been any really crime committed until we can prove it, but I will send my deputies out there on a daily basis and patrol that area a lot more and handle anything that comes up.
Sheriff?
Okay, we're going to have to cut this off because we're supposed to be having a
Sheriff, do you
public
feel like this
hearing
board's
at
been so
10:30.
supportive to get you those additional deputies? And that's got to be a huge and important focus for us.
We were just able to get 4 deputies this year with the board's approval. I'm in the process of hiring those subjects. I've hired 4, but we've lost a few, so I'm still trying to get caught up to the full staff.
He's talking right now. Thank you. Yeah, it does matter.
Okay, we're going to have a public...
Would you pay attention? That's show respect, please.
Mr. Little, we're going to have to forego you just for a minute or two because we've got a public hearing that was supposed to start at 10:30.
Are we going to get to that in a reasonable period of time, or do I need to leave?
We should be able to get through it pretty quickly. I don't know.
How many more speakers do we have, Madam Chair?
It says, well, I've got from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Madam Chair, so the public hearing you're talking about is for the supplemental budgets, correct?
Exactly,
Okay,
and that was in the newspaper listed at 10:30.
All right, so my suggestion would that you would open the public hearing. If there's any comments on the supplemental budgets from the public, they would be able to hear that. Then we could go back
And finish the public comments?
Finish public comments and then address the supplemental budgets at a later time period within the meeting.
Okay, that's fine. Is there anybody here from the public that wanted to speak relative to these supplemental budgets? Okay, hearing no public input, we'll get back to the comments. Lucky you.
All right, look at that.
Okay, Brian Little.
My name is Brian Little. For those who don't know me, I own Curry County Title here locally. I'm just here to speak about the potential strike that's coming if things can't be negotiated between this board and the Curry Public employees. I'm basically here to talk about real estate in general because the strike is a serious threat to my business. Basically, it would shut down the entire real estate industry in this county, and I know you think maybe that's not the case, but it certainly would be, especially the recording office, the assessor's office, and the planning department work to support the real estate industry in this community. You're talking just if there's a month shut down in the month of August, you're talking about $30 million of real estate that will not close. As a title insurer, if those offices aren't working at full staff, I'm not able to insure transactions. If I'm not able to insure transactions, the entire industry comes to a halt. You're talking $2 to $2.5 million of realtor commissions that will not be issued during that period of time. I have a staff of 12. There's over 120 realtors. That alone, and then you start talking construction. These lenders who lend for construction come to my office. I have to give information on are there liens against it, but if they can't record liens, I can't protect them and insure that. So then construction comes to a halt. So then you have contractors who can't work, and then you have their staffs who cannot work. So it has a very dramatic effect if those offices aren't running. If the thought comes up, well, we'll get volunteers in there to keep them running at bare bones, that's not sufficient. You have a group of people who've been trained for many years to do these jobs. A volunteer off the street would take 6 months at least to be trained to do the basic things that these people are doing every single day. It's a very serious threat to my industry, not just my company, but a huge amount of people. Real estate is very important to this community and this county. So I'm just here to implore to the board, please negotiate, come to some form of a compromise. And that goes to both sides. The people who are looking to strike need to compromise as well as the board here. And I understand the budget is tight, but something has to be done because a strike would be devastating. And the potential impact long term would be huge. It wouldn't just be for that month. It's not like things would just come back. You stop doing something for a month, it's not going to come back. We're at a peak market right now, so you'd be destroying values. You'd be costing the people of Curry County tens of millions of dollars. that would be a great shame. That would be disappointment for me. So thank you for your time. I'll let you
Thank
back to
you.
your meeting.
Connie Hunter? If you could combine your two slips in one, I'd appreciate it. Because we're pretty
You
much-
don't have to. 'Cause we're all about the public getting their comment opportunities. Thank you.
What about it? Okay. All right. Why don't you just hold that in items submitted?
Hopefully you don't have to come back.
Go ahead,
ready?
Connie.
Okay. These are some big packages of good information. I was recently seated as the vice president for Curry Community. So the Curry County Mental Health and Addiction Advisory Board through Curry Community Health, I'm their vice president at this time. And I would like to speak a little bit to what Gordon Clay mentioned. Of course, he and I work in tandem. After I did the Veteran Suicide Awareness Town Hall meeting a number of years ago, Gordon came up to me and he said, Connie, he said, we have high suicide rate among our veterans and our adolescents. I said, well, let's do something about that. So we've been working in tandem for about 5 years. Curry Community Health has adopted important objectives and priorities, and of course suicide support and trying to create a culture in our community that is not about suicide contagion. When you have 3 high rankings of suicide in a county, that's a public health crisis, okay? And what we know is our efforts to reach out to the state has reaped a number of rewards. In your package, you're going to see some information. I attended the Oregon Health Authority Coordinated Care Organizations 2.1 Policy Development event recently. You'll see in there our efforts, and we were straight up. I came from Arizona where we sued the state on behalf of individuals and won, and the courts forced our legislature in Arizona to fund more for mental health. And I spoke those words straight up even to the governor herself and Alex Campbell. But if you look at the priorities for our coordinated care organizations, behavioral health is #1. So what that means is a combination of things. There's going to be more money coming down the pike to address addictions and suicide rate. But what a lot of people aren't putting together, and I'm going to convene on September 21st at the college, the Curry campus, the second VA Healthcare Summit. We're calling it VA Healthcare Summit 2.0. It's going to emphasize mental health. On September 10th, we're going to have a regional catchment area mental health summit that's being put on by the VA. And what we've asked the VA to do is work together with us to identify all the local providers so that we can create a referral tool. That's what was missing, one of the things that was missing in the events that Gordon described today, and the fact that we don't have a mental health bed at Curry Health Network. So we do have some things that we have to solve, but I know that with the new, and if you look in your package, you're going to see the Veterans Affairs information. That's the new information on the VA Mission Act. And the VA Mission Act is based on the rationale that when we sued the state of Arizona, some of those test cases were veterans. So we knew if the VA didn't perform, it still fell back on the responsibility of the state. And when only 1 in 3 veterans are using their benefits, that means the state still has a responsibility. So
We're going to have to cut you off.
okay, thank you. At September 21, we're going to navigate that.
Because this is one of my concerns, the lack of mental health.
And we can put things together, Sue, like never have been put together before because of the funding that's coming from the VA to rural communities, specifically for communities like ours. And the state is now recognized. I'm sorry, Commissioner Court. I didn't mean to.
This is under your September 10th Regional Mental Health Summit. That's getting a lot of statewide attention, and that's going to benefit our county. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Madam Chair, right now.
Okay, Christopher Pash.
Christopher Pash from Gold Beach. Ex-Sheriff John Bishop said a few months ago that the state of Oregon is laughing at Curry County. And I think the thrust of his comment was because of the failure, some of the failures of this board to do its job. Rather than funding Sheriff Ward's Sheriff's Department with the proper number of deputies, using the right funds to do that, this board wants to argue about how we're talked to and the rules of decorum in this room. Rather than hiring code enforcement officers to protect the citizens of the county, they want to sue Court Boyce for traveling down to Brookings every week or every day during the Chetco bar fire and going over his travel budget. On that note, the law in the state of Oregon is much more liberal than the county commissioners have here. I guess my big point is that this board is probably the most inept board I've ever seen. All you do is fight amongst each other and worry about small trivial things rather than going out and using the positions that you've been elected to bring revenue sources into the county. All we do is all you ever do is sit in here and argue and find ways to fight and scratch against each other. There's no group here. There's no joining together to get things done. It's always a constant battle in here, and it's always over trivial things. This county is in dire straits. We need revenue sources. We need to get along. We need a sheriff's department that will protect us from these people that a lot of people in this room are sitting here fighting about. What are we going to do the day that we call 911 and 911 operator says, well, we don't have a sheriff's department because we didn't have enough money in the budget to fund it. So I'm sorry, we can't help you. Good luck with that. There are so many things that aren't getting taken care of in this county because all we do is we waste time in this office, in these meetings, arguing amongst each other and worrying about trivial things. I would hope that the people of this county would start to look at this commission and decide what you'd really like to see here. Whether it be myself or Jerry Lynn, we need to make changes, and we need to have people that will stand up and fight for the citizens of this county. You know, we've got unions here that haven't had a raise in, and I'm not sure.
Got one.
Well,
just to let you know.
The cost of living increases aren't matching up to the cost of living. So I guess my time is up. I just want to say that from the people that are in this county that have spoken to me, I would hope that our board would try to do better because it's quite frankly an embarrassment most of the time.
Thank you. Sharon Hartwell.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. I do take exception to one thing. We use the word trivia, and it kind of combines us all together. For 19 months, I've tried to get this county on a priority. I've tried to get us on wise spending. I've tried to build bridges. It has been an absolute failure. You look back at the previous board, there's your evidence. Commissioner Huxley's not had one person in this building, essentially, that he could get along with.
Okay, we need to stop the contention.
Thank you.
Well, I can understand that.
Okay, we've got
but when I read in the morning paper that we're going to spend $300 an hour to hire a law firm out of Portland to sue you
I'm sorry,
for more money than
Mr. Pash.
I love your fight, and that's what it's going to take. Thank you.
Sharon
That's exactly what it's going to take.
Good, Sharon.
This will be very brief. Everything that pretty much has been covered for the problems going on the Crestline Loop. But are we allowed to say whose house it is? Because everybody knows him.
Yeah.
much.
Sure, go for it.
And you cannot believe it's Bill Schlichting from the newspaper. It's his house. They stand on the lawn and they holler and scream at the neighbors, threatening. One of the guys has a baseball bat and he's going to kill everybody with that baseball bat. Another guy has a knife that'll slice right through your throat faster than anything. This is what we listen to every day. They sleep in I've got pictures of them sleeping on the front lawn in sleeping bags. They sit up in the morning, light their pipes with their bottles of booze, and they sit there like they own the world. If you try to say anything or do anything, you get retaliation like you wouldn't believe. And they taunt us all by saying, you can't do anything. We know that. We can do anything we want. This is not right. It's not just the health problem. It's like these people said, they were kids sitting on the front porch playing with the family pet. The dog runs over, takes the pet out of their hands, carries it off, and kills it in front of the kids. This stuff goes on all the time. I think because it's Bill and he works for the newspaper, he has a scanner and he knows when the police are coming. They hear sirens or whatever, the word goes out and you can just watch the house and they're fleeing like cockroaches, just hiding till the cops come. They check out things, they go in, they search the house, whatever, and then when they're gone, everybody comes back. And life is just like it always is. And it's just, you can't go out of the house anymore. Our
Okay,
lives
well, we'll
are
be
over.
looking into it for you.
Yeah, so it's not just the health thing.
No, I understand.
It's very dangerous.
Yeah, I
And we're all
understand.
threatened. So thank you for listening to us.
Not only that, thank you for coming and letting us know what's going on. Thank you. Okay, moving on.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
We have Emergency Manager Jeremy Dumeyer here. It might be a good idea to have a quick fire report on all the lightning, an update if he is available. Very important in my view.
We'll just make that under public comments. Can you make it short, Jeremy? Okay, come on in.
Yeah, it's just a fire. Make it short.
Good morning. Appreciate you being able to squeeze me in like this. Jeremy
Thanks for
Dumeyer,
waiting.
Curry County Emergency Services. So I just wanted to comment on the fires we've had here in Curry County. Of course, we had the Lobster Creek fire, which took place in the early part of this month. That was attacked aggressively and successfully, and is still being patrolled and mopped up at this point. On Sunday, we had a very...
Can you say who attacked aggressively and that fire?
Yes, Oregon Department of Forestry and Coast Forest Protective Association. On Sunday, we had a very unique lightning storm come through. In the 9-county area that the National Weather Service in Medford monitors, there were about 1,900 cloud-to-ground lightning strikes, 53 of which hit Curry County. A few of those did spark fires that have been found. Fires up on the Bear Camp Road area were attacked aggressively by a number of different resources, and those have been put into containment. There are fires around Curry County on the Granite Peak and Klondike areas of the Kalmiopsis, Josephine County side. Those are staffed. They're 8 acres in size each. Those are staffed with an incident management team out of Lake Selma, and other fires that have been found from these lightning strikes have been aggressively attacked. So at this point, this is not last year. This has been a complete success of the firefighting industry. They have pre-positioned resources to attack these fires, and from what I saw yesterday in my trip out to the Kalmiopsis, I was very pleased with what I saw.
That's good.
Mr.
Thank
Dumeyer, the Klondike and the Granite fire, I think you referenced.
Yes.
You said they're relatively close to where the fire started, the Chetco last year.
Relatively.
2 miles, 3 miles, roughly?
I'd have to take a look at the maps. I'd say within 2 to 3 miles. A lot of good black, if you will, between those fires and our neck of the woods. So when I say that, I feel very comfortable about those.
Your
There's
report
not
this
a lot of
morning.
fuel.
Okay, your report this morning is that they've not grown much beyond the 2 8 acres that they both in the last 12 hours or 24 hours?
Correct. There's not been any new reports from the Forest Service on this.
Okay.
However, talking with Coos Forest Protective this morning, their fires are getting close together. They're probably about 10 acres at this point, but that's speculation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sounds to me like they're working on it, being more proactive rather than reactive.
This is not
And that's good
2017.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to the consent calendar. I'm looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar with the exceptions of item B, E, and F.
So moved, Madam Chair.
With
Do I-
with the signature authority to the chair on the last item.
Oh. Okay, and I.
So B, E, and I.
Sounds good, thank you.
B, E, and I. So do I have a
I'll second.
Any discussion?
You don't discuss consent agenda.
Okay. Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so we'll go to item 4B, which is the contract with the True Lock Security for installation of new door locks. Is Eric Hansen here? Coming.
He may not have heard you, Madam Chair.
He did. Eric, you're up. We're talking about the locks.
Yes, this is a system that would give us much greater security and control of access. The system that's up now is the first generation of card locks, and they've gone by the wayside. They're antiquated. It doesn't give us the control we'd like to have on our buildings and our security.
So are you able to replace parts or anything like that?
There are no more parts available.
Okay.
And I've acquired quite a collection of pieces and parts, and just this week we had another one fail, and we were unable to Frankenstein one back into life, and there are no more parts manufactured.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
And you mentioned yesterday in an email that other entities like us are trying to do the same thing, scramble around getting any parts that they can, and they're just not available.
Exactly. I've been in touch with quite a few of them, including all the vendors, and there are no more support for this system.
Okay, so any more questions of Eric? Commissioner Huxley?
Basically, Eric, I requested, after I looked at I want to say it was sort of a vague contract, a lot of waivers, insurance waivers, and I'm assuming this is a small sole proprietor. It's an assumption based on the contract I'm seeing.
Yes, it is. It's a sole proprietor.
And it's saying, I didn't see anything really about warranty, on this, be it the factory, lock product warranties to the warranty of the installation, on the payments. Well, not, it didn't really go into that either, on the payments. Is it going to be so much upon award of contract, et cetera, et cetera? It just wasn't identified. On the completion date, it said, well, we're complete within a year, and I'm thinking, just concerning things like that were pretty vague or so far out there. Clearly, if it's going to take a year, I think we have some problems.
It will not take a year. We can probably accomplish this in a week. The proprietor requests all the materials be paid. That's the $21,000 and change, and then upon completion he'll receive the additional that brings it up to the $25,000.
Now, I didn't see any of that breakdown.
That's Exhibit A.
Exhibit A?
Yes, sir.
And if it can be within a week, I think we should change within a year.
Yes, that's just the standard contract form. That's the one that I've been using for years.
But you've been assured that he can complete the system within a week once he gets the money for the
I will make
parts.
sure of that.
Okay.
I have talked to the proprietor also concerning the transition, because obviously all the locks cannot be changed simultaneously, so we'll be switching from these to little fobs.
Oh, okay.
And so we'll be he has a plan to basically, in working with Eric, to make sure that as doors are changed, people that need access to those doors have the fobs, and we'll just slowly transition over a week, 7-day period to transition out of these into the fobs. So I've been assured by...
This is all you'll need now.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, so it sounds like he has it under control, and I'm satisfied with his plan.
Okay.
I've spoken with the manufacturer, and they have sent tech support out. He drove all the way to Portland on his own dime to explain the system to me and all of its advantages. This week so far, I've logged 6 hours on just trying to nurse these along as personnel changes. That requires that Tad goes to every door, and I'm sure you've seen him around. So far this week it's been 6 hours. And
So what you're saying is basically this is going to save you a lot of your time in the
a
long
lot
run.
of our time. We could walk into a room with a smartphone, hit a button, go on to the next one.
Okay, great. Do we have a motion to...
Well, I have some more
Oh,
questions.
okay,
I still have
questions?
concerns. I'd like to see if it's going to be a week or two. I'd like to see something to that effect in writing, in the agreement, rather than say, well, I felt okay. That's what creates issues down the road.
Yes.
Factually.
What you can do is you can make a motion to amend section, looks like section 3, and it says all work shall be completed within a year. You can say a month or a week. It's up to the board. And you've heard testimony of what the proposed or contemplated timeline is, and if the board wants to move to amend the item, they can.
And what about the warranty?
Well, it's hard to warranty technology because it changes so rapidly, but the units are warranted for 15 years.
So is that addressed in here somewhere?
No, it isn't. I can provide the warranty and addendum.
Was that a factory warranty from
It's a
Schlag?
factory warranty, yes.
Not from...
And it's Schlage, right?
Schlag,
Correct.
sure.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you, Madam Chair. How long have you've been with us? 10 years, 12 years?
This is my 11th.
11th year. Thank you. I was pretty close. And I've known the Tams family forever. And so between you and the integrity he has, that's good enough for me. Let's get it done. That's my preference, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, I just have one suggestion for the contract. Maybe say after parts are delivered, the installer will have 1 month to finish the installation. Does that sound reasonable?
Perfect. Absolutely.
Okay.
And a copy of the warranty.
Sure.
Attached in
When
here.
we receive the parts,
And
I'll have the warranty in hand.
also, do we have a repair, if it's out of warranty, do we have a rate schedule? I'm assuming that this would be the same individual that would come in and do repair work or warranty work. Is that correct?
Well, I'm able to perform the repairs if I have parts available. There isn't one of these that I cannot fix.
We're talking about the new
Correct.
system. Okay, so you don't expect this installer to have to come back to do any repair work?
No. And another nice thing about this new system is we don't have to drill any more holes in the door. They will snap right in place with the existing template.
Are there any spare locks that are envisioned in this order, or are they going to buy 30 and use them all?
I will have 2 spares at the end of this operation.
Okay, so you're going to install 28 and have 2 spares?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I just want to make sure you're
What?
confident that a month is a reasonable and realistic time for his work.
I'm confident that that will be.
Thank you
plenty of
again.
time.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve this contract as amended?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay?
And just to be sure, the addendum or the addition was 1 month after he receives the locks, and that a warranty would be
Attached.
Got it.
Okay, Call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Item, let's move to 6C.
You wanted 4E, I think, is what you had said earlier.
4E. Okay, 4E, that's appoint Curry County Budget Officer.
My question was why we had an older order where we appointed for the 2018-19 budget. Now we're reappointing for no particular budget, but just as a budget officer.
Louise Colstrom, County Accountant. Well, what we looked at was that the order was very specific about the time period. It was to prepare the current year's budget, the 18-19 budget. And so I talked to County Council about it, and so we have a new order that just basically appoints the county accountant as the budget officer, and then we won't have to do an annual type order on this.
Okay, any questions? Could we get a motion to approve?
So move, Madam Chair.
I'll second.
Okay, call for the question.
Aye.
Aye.
And I'm going to abstain on the vote.
Okay.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, did you vote?
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Okay, another thing we need to look at is 4I, getting signature authority for the attorney retainer agreement for the opioid lawsuit.
Well, we didn't pull that, though.
We didn't pull it, but there needs to be signature authority.
Okay.
added to
Actually,
that.
we added that when we did the consent agenda. I added with signature authority to the chair on the last item.
Okay, so we're good.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, then let's get into the presentations. We've got Louise Colstrom, County Accountant, and we've got the Curry County Public Service District Audit.
Louise Colstrom, County Accountant, and to present the Curry County Public Transit Service District Audit to you. We have our auditor from Polly Rogers. Pete, I have a hard time with your last name.
I think Pete's fine.
Okay.
Good enough for us.
So are we not doing the county itself?
There's two presentations. One's on the
Okay.
Public Transit District and the other one's on the Curry County.
Would it be okay to combine?
We could.
I'd love it.
Honorable members of the board, public servants, members of the public, it is my pleasure to present the findings of the Polly Rogers and Company audit of both the county and the transit district's financial statements. In front of you, you should have a communication to the governing body, a separate report from the bound, the short stapled copy that for Curry County, Oregon. And I find that's an excellent summary to everything that I need to present to you so that you don't have to necessarily flip through the hundreds of pages of the actual fairly intense financial data. This is an excellent summary. So starting with that, communication to the governing body on page 1, this is kind of laying out some basic language of what exactly a financial statement audit is. Assuming you all have done this before, you're familiar with this process. So we can move right along past what the scope of the audit is, what our job is, what the board's job is, what the finance department's job is, and get right into results. That's on page 2. So if we go to page 2 where it says results of audit, for those of you familiar with this process, you know that there are actually 3 different audits that an entity of your size and complexity gets. You get the financial statement audit itself, and that is us as auditors looking at all the different numbers that the county has put together and seeing if we can say whether there's reasonable certainty that there's not material misstatement in those. Then we have state minimum standards. Those are otherwise known as OMS, Oregon Minimum Standards. If we were auditors in a different state, we wouldn't be doing this, but the Secretary of State in Oregon has asked us to opine or register an opinion on things that are not necessarily financial in nature. And then finally, we have a single audit, otherwise known as the federal awards audit. That's where we take a look at a certain package of federal awards that's being passed through to the county, and we choose a different program every year as financial auditors and give that the amount of attention that the Fed requires in the compliance supplements, and we'll be talking more about that. So, most important thing probably, at least to most boards, but so folks have their personal opinions, would be the financial statement audit. The financial statement audit, we have given an unmodified opinion to the basic financial statements. In plain English, that means it's a clean opinion. That's generally what you want. So that's good news. Number 2, state minimum standards. We found no exceptions or issues requiring comment, except as noted on page 121 of the report. I'll jump more into that in a bit, but the fact that we say no exceptions or issues requiring comment means that there's nothing big. There's some little things that we'll be talking about later. For number 3, the federal awards, that's the single audit, the major programs that we chose to audit in last year for federal funds. We found 4 issues of noncompliance and no question costs. So that is something that we will be talking about. And then finally, number 4 on this results of audits, there was no separate management letter issued. The reason for that is formal. That's because when you have a federal audit, a single audit, the results are actually in the bound report per standards from the Fed. So those are all your audits. 3, clean, no exceptions, and then some 4 issues of noncompliance in the other. So overall, about what you expect for a district, or sorry, for a county.
How many stars do we get?
There's no stars rating, so I can't say that. But we will get into the specifics. But overall, I would say that the unmodified opinion in number 1 is kind of the centerpiece. And of course, there's a lot of other things that we can talk about, and I will go into as much detail as you want, or as little as you want. You just tell me. So that being said, we can move on to page 3. This is where we as auditors need to tell the board what exactly happened with the audit in overall scope and style. These are things like if there were difficulties encountered in performing it, if there were uncorrected misstatements, if there were disagreements with management, say they define cash one way and we say, well, actually we think cash should be defined another way. Things of that nature where we're really talking about nuts and bolts. We have to disclose all of that in here in this part of the report. And if you go through and read, you'll see pretty boilerplate, pretty standard. We asked for information, we got it. We agreed on common terms. You know, we're speaking the same language as accountants to each other, which is exactly what you want. Now, of course, it was late, but we understand that the majority of the reason for that was the change of personnel. So we would hope that in future years that is not the case. So, if you flip to page 4, you will see a section called Best Practices, Non-Significant Deficiencies. I'd like to come back to this because I feel that there are other issues that were talked about that are a little bit more at the top of the list. Best practices is a term that I, as someone who's charged with explaining things to boards and to the public quite often, I don't enjoy this term. It's an industry term, and you hear it all the time. But I think as native English speakers, we hear the term best practice, and we think, oh, that's stuff we should be doing. That's not the case. Best practice is simply, these are things that we as auditors are communicating to the board, and I would much prefer if we could change it to say communication of risk, but unfortunately I don't run GAP, I don't run GASB. I'm not in charge of those things.
Can we just sort of interrupt?
Sure, of course, please. Yeah.
Can we go back to page 3?
Yes, definitely.
And on the management representations, which is about a third down. Says we have requested certain representations for management that are included in the management representation letter.
Yes.
But in the management letter, it says no separate management letter was issued. So
yes, these things are just, it's funny you're segueing into this because this exactly gets to how some of these terms can be confusing. A management representation letter is actually different from a management letter.
Okay.
We apologize. As auditors, we have a lot of different, very technical and legal terms, and it can be a little annoying. Okay. But basically, the management letter is us presenting findings. That's for the board to be aware of. The management representation letter is when we as auditors ask management to say, is everything that you told us true? Are you saying that you gave us everything that we asked for? And they're signing a legal document saying that. So
because there were several letters from Polly Rogers that were all dated June 11th.
Correct.
2018.
Exactly.
Okay.
Great question. Thank you. So, yeah, I was just explaining that I'd like to return to the best practices, but I would like to draw folks' attention to the fact that I would much prefer that we think of this as communications of risk, not that these are things that must be done, because that's just not the case. Okay, so to talk about some of the things that were mentioned in point 4, the single audit, that is where we as auditors are required to report our findings that we consider to be significant. And those are on page 128 of the bound report. So if you would like to follow along in the bound Maine County report, that's page 128. And this is our report on not only what the Fed requires us to do when we're looking at single audits, the various major programs of federal dollars that we're required to take a look at, but when we are looking at anything that involves a certain amount of federal dollars, we then have to opine on any significant deficiency regardless of whether it was related to those federal dollars or not. So that's why you're going to see finding number 1 and finding number 2 here on page 128 and 129 that are not necessarily related to the single audit, but this is just where we reported it. So long story short, doesn't matter where it came from, but these are the findings that we feel as auditors are the most significant and worthy of your attention. So starting with number 1, finding 2017-001, significant deficiency in internal controls over segregation of duties. This is extremely common for an entity, a county such as yourself, that doesn't necessarily have a huge amount of staff, a large accounting department, things of that nature. Whenever staff is generally cut, segregation of duties issues tend to rise. We expect that, and we found exactly that. So due to the limited number of available personnel in the county's offices, there's a lack of segregation of duties over related accounting records or transactions. The personnel coordinator has both emergency authority as a check signer and also physical access to check stock, allowing checks to be written without review. Also, the personnel coordinator may investigate and correct time cards without a review process by another party. Furthermore, the building department administrative assistant is involved in multiple phases of the billing function for small permit fees, and the road department office manager is able to perform inventory changes without approval or review by another party. So these are all the specifics of areas that we feel are in a larger situation where you'd want different folks involved in signing off, reviewing, and approving various aspects of how things are run. Now, because this is a formal federal page that has to be reported on, you will see that there is already a views of responsible officials and planned corrected actions. That's at the bottom of page 128. So the county has already, by way of the finance office, responded to this and has some things that they're going to be considering and doing. The main item is the county added grant administrator to the job description of the finance director, aka the county accountant, as of 2018. As grant administrator, the job description requires the finance director to process final steps on all grant applications, such as signature authority, authorization for county matching funds, etc. The grant administrator will also require all departments to send a copy of grant awards to the federal finance office for admin oversight. The county plans to address the feasibility of hiring or assigning additional staff hours to segregate phases of the billing function for small permit fees, as well as to review the road department inventory changes initiated by the road department office manager. So basically saying what the board, what the finance department would like to do is up to you, but it's being looked into. That's the long and short of that. Moving on to finding 2017-002, significant deficiency in property tax assessment. This is a repeat finding that was given by the prior auditors in prior years. You may remember this is the same exact thing. And this is just saying that the county does not necessarily have the resources to assess the value of properties and ensure property taxes properly collected on a regular basis. The term regular is really the crux of that statement and open to interpretation, because is this done on a yearly basis? Is this on a biannual basis? You know, there's no specific. But what the prior auditors and we confirmed is just that we didn't see evidence that on a yearly basis or shorter that there was a significant number of field agents that were going out and assessing property values. That it was happening, but not necessarily at the pace that we would expect. So is that necessarily something that can be solved without more funds? Probably not. I think we're going to see a recurring theme here with a lot of these, but that's just something that we want to bring to folks' attention. The response, views of responsible officials and plan corrective actions. The county plans to assess the feasibility of hiring and assigning additional staff hours to more comprehensively assess property on a rotating schedule. So going along with that same theme. Moving on to page 130 and 131, these are the findings that actually are about federal awards themselves, the major programs that we as auditors took a look at. And we specifically were looking at CFDA number 20.106, that's the Airport Improvement Program. This is the same finding that was given in the prior year, so it's the same issue. However, it's our understanding that moving forward, this has already been corrected. So this is one of those cases where we as auditors are saying, we saw something, and hopefully this year it goes away. So we're moving in the right direction there. And that's just the county was unable to provide evidence that forms SF-271 and SF-425 were filed timely with the appropriate federal authorities. Not a major concern, and it's our understanding that that had to do with the change in personnel, and that with the new folks who are on staff, that is being filed. And as an auditor who's currently working this week with the county, I've already seen evidence that this is being corrected, so I'm feeling pretty good on that front so far. Moving on to finding 2017.-004, significant deficiency on reporting. This was basically just a bunch of legal gobbledygook saying that you missed the deadline to report to the Fed. That's all that is. So moving forward, again, we would hope that now that there's a new person in place in charge as county accountant, and that we as auditors are setting out the timetable that we agreed to just 2 days ago, that we are on track to not have this finding appear again this year, and that's exactly what you'd hope for. So those are the major findings, the significant deficiencies that we wanted to talk about. I can now move on to the best practices if you'd like, or did y'all have any questions on those?
Looks like we're good.
All right, moving right along to best practices.
Well,
so again,
I do have a comment.
Yes.
And because dollars, we're talking more procedure versus the dollar consequences.
That's correct.
Versus that there were no consequences for whether you were trained or not for performance. And the dollar consequences here were pretty significant. And when I say pretty significant, close to 6 figures is what was finally determined.
I'm not sure I'm following.
Well, what I'm saying is in monitoring some of these grants for the airport.
Yeah.
Okay. It had to do with matching funds and let's not get bogged down on experience versus lack of experience.
Okay.
But ultimately, because of procedures were not followed to request matching funds, when it was all said and done, the magnitude of that consequence of that was about $100,000.
I see. That's something that we as auditors wouldn't take an opinion on.
But somebody should, because if it were you or me personally, it would be a catastrophe. At least it would be for me, and I think for many people.
I completely understand your concern.
We do need to at least in a meeting like this address that, because it's unconscionable in my opinion. Again, because it's not my money. It is, because everybody here should have a fiduciary responsibility to treat it like it was our money.
Understood.
So again, that's my comment on that, but it was a significant dollar amount, very significant.
Yeah, as auditors, we would have no opinion, but we appreciate your input. Okay, so moving back to best practices. Like I said, I much prefer to think of these as communications of risk. So our job as auditors is to communicate risk to the board. The board is, of course, welcome to decide, well, we really don't feel that with the risks, it's worth, spending any extra dollars or allocating any extra resources. That's definitely what a governing body would do. So just take that with a few grains of salt, and we'll start on this list. So best practices, non-significant deficiencies, none of these affect our overall audit opinion. Number 1, outstanding checks. During our testing of bank reconciliations, we noted that the detailed listing of outstanding checks did not include the date the check was written, so we just encourage that the county start doing that. It's our understanding that when we finish our bank reconciliation and cash testing for this year, we'll be hoping to see that. And
Well, that's easy to fix.
we will be seeing that. Okay, well, you just got a positive confirmation. So that's looking good there. Number 2, Fidelity insurance coverage. Cash balances exceed the Fidelity, aka employee honesty insurance coverage of $500,000. While this may be an appropriate level of coverage, we recommend each year that the board determine if this is an acceptable level of risk based on the potential liability. This one needs a tiny bit of extra explanation. We as auditors are extremely conservative in our definition of cash. So when we say cash, we mean cash as reported on the financial statements, and that includes not only what's in various bank accounts, but also what's in LGIP, the local government investment pool, and some of those larger investment accounts that are much harder for your average person to access within the finance department. So being conservative, that is why we usually make this comment. You're an excellent company here. Every county, every city, and every district that I have given a presentation like this to gets this same note, and that's simply because it's almost impossible to get full coverage for the amount of cash, especially including LGIP, that any entity would have. So it's more just, if the board feels that that amount is the right amount, then that's the right amount. It's just that we want to bring it to your attention because it is a theoretical liability. Moving on to number 3, Form I-9 compliance. In reviewing I-9 employment forms for employees, we noted some employee I-9 forms were not fully completed. We recommend that management have proper controls in place to ensure that they are. And we are seeing progress on that front. We'll be reporting on that in our exit conference in just a few days, actually. Moving on to number 4, governing body monitoring. An integral part of internal controls is the monitoring of financial activities by those charged with governance. This can be accomplished by 3 specific things that we as auditors are tasked to look for by GASB. And that is, number 1, asking specifically designed questions of senior staff. We see ample evidence of that. Number 2, by reviewing financial statements and projections by the board, financial statements and projections, and by comparing financial results, number 3, to pre-established benchmarks. So number 1 and number 2, we see ample evidence of in review of the minutes. Number 3, we don't see evidence of, and that's extremely common. We don't expect to see folks do this. This is an example of where GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board, pulls its rules from FASB, which is the Wall Street version. And a lot of times when they pull over private company Wall Street stuff, it's not necessarily applicable to government financial statements. So pre-established benchmarks, what is that? Have you all heard this note from previous auditors? Because I could cut this conversation short. But basically it's something that folks don't do because no 2 counties are alike, right? And so comparing the finances of one to the other may not give you special insight. And it would take time and it would take money. It's probably not worth it, but that's for the board to decide, not for us. So we're just pointing that out. So that's basically what number 4 is saying. Moving on to number 5, intellectual property.
May I make a comment?
Of course.
On number 4, on when we talk about reviewing financial statements, what occurred just a couple of weeks ago was some members from the Curry County Budget Committee have requested, and it was approved unanimously, for that committee to meet quarterly, a month lag. So in other words, July, August, September. So we're meeting the end of October as a budget committee to review revenue and expense reports.
Sure.
Financial, be far greater, I think, than has been done certainly before, and by a different group of individuals. And I think that will be extremely positive on what we see.
Sounds good. So number 5, intellectual property. In the documents provided to us, we saw no indication of county policy regarding the ownership of intellectual property developed by staff using either county assets or time. We see that there is a partial policy, and we expect that the county is working on a more robust one that's incorporating both of those 2 items. So we'll expect to see this comment drop off in future years. This is not a problem, but this is something that our managing partner, Roy Rogers, wants to let folks know about, because usually most counties, most cities, most public institutions that we work with are fairly altruistic, and the people who are doing things understand they're doing it in good faith for the service of the people. It's when those people retire that sometimes this comes into play, and if intellectual property was created, sometimes they want to take it with them or start to claim certain types of ownership. And simply having a policy, and it doesn't necessarily need to be the conservative Wall Street version, right, where it's like anything that's created on county property or using county time is the property of the county. It could go the other way and say whatever you make is yours, or some version in between. But again, that's for the board to say, not for us. Moving on to number 6, journal entries. The treasurer makes adjusting journal entries based on their own review process of adjusting journal entries submitted by department's head regarding adjustments to revenue. While rare, these adjusting entries are not reviewed by someone independent of that process. We recommend that someone other than the person who makes the adjusting entries review them for reasonableness and accuracy to enhance internal controls. We're already seeing evidence as auditors this year that this is being addressed. So this should also be dropping off, which is great news. Moving on to number 7, GASB 77. This is a new pronouncement for the fiscal year, and this has to do with, well, I'll just read it. Then we'll get into the explanations. The assessor's office does not publicly post information about GASB 77, a summary of property tax distribution to districts such as Table 4As, etc., on its website. While this information is available by directly contacting the assessor, we would recommend this information be publicly posted on the website to increase the perception of transparency and the efficiency of taxing districts within the county to easily access and verify information needed to file their financial statements with the Secretary of State. So the information is available. We would just recommend that it be available on the websites, and specifically the GASB 77, because that is a new and confusing GASB pronouncement that has to do with property tax abatements. For those of you not familiar with this, the law is intentionally obtuse. They wrote it in a way that certain abatements need to be disclosed, but not others. So for instance, what's a common one? Housing and urban development, folks who are doing things where you're setting up a special tax for a certain part of a city. Things of that nature are definitely disclosed. One of the big ones that's not would be anything having to do with farming. So there's a lot of interesting things about what abatements are disclosed and what aren't. And by the way, big picture, what are abatements for folks who aren't in this world? Basically saying there's a part of the financial statements for most entities. The county's on the reverse end of this. It's talking about what was levied. But most entities say this is how much tax revenue they got. And then the abatements now show for the first time ever this year, this is how much the county would have got had it not been for those abatements. In other words, you know, if folks were taxed without various changes to those tax codes.
It's called good lobbyists.
I make no opinion, but that is the nature of that GASB 77. So, moving on, number 8, minimum number of appropriated funds. This is a standard note that I'm sure y'all are used to and sick of at this point, but it is something that both GFOA and GASB recommend. So basically just saying that there only be 4 major funds and no more. So of course the county is allowed to have as many other funds as it wants for budgetary purposes, but for reporting purposes, those all be folded into 4 major. Do you have to do that? Absolutely not, but it is something that the GFOA recommends. Moving on to number 9, capital assets. The county does not currently have a policy to reevaluate capital asset lives. While we did see evidence the county in fiscal year 16-17 did a review of the capital asset register, we noted there's no standard schedule to physically count and analyze the usefulness and existence of all fixed assets annually. This again goes back to the size of the department. We wouldn't expect there to be enough people and resources to necessarily do this given the current constraints. But that is a note that we had to give. Number 10, board minutes. Board minutes are not prepared or posted publicly in a timely manner. Multiple months from July to December of 2017, as well as months in 2018, had only agendas and packet information posted online with no minutes posted to the county website. We recommend that a process be put in place to ensure consistent documentation timeliness of the preparations of board minutes. We've already seen that that is changing, so looking good for next year. Moving on to number 11. Approval of tax office turnover of receipts form. We noted that some tax office turnover of receipts to treasurer's office forms were not being signed to indicate approval on the cash approved by line. We recommend they be signed. And that sounds like one that will be fixed this year. We'll just be looking for evidence for that. Number 12, system reconciliations. At the end of each fiscal year, a reconciliation is performed by the county's general ledger and road department IRIS system regarding inventory, but is not reviewed or approved. We recommend that someone other than the person who prepares that reconciliation review it for accuracy to enhance internal control. Fairly standard. Again, the same type of note we were talking about with segregation of duties. That is it. We made it.
Good.
Any other
have any other
questions?
questions?
Oh, right.
Oh, the transportation one.
Thank you. So the transportation district, as it operates within the county, is its own sub-fund, and all of the findings that we have echo the ones that are in the county. So I'm going to quickly just visually confirm this because I did review this previous to this meeting. Yeah, there's no findings on here that were not already discussed. So because this has to legally be presented as a separate financial report, we have to legally issue a separate service district management letter, but it's the exact findings that were already discussed.
There you go, JJ. I think it's in the packet, though. You might want to give one to Kathy, though. Is that for the transit district?
There's 2 extra here.
Do you have one?
There's actually 2
You need one?
letters with this one. So
Is this transit
Oh. So I passed mine off and I shouldn't have.
district? Okay. So this is on the transit service district. This is in the packet, but Kathy, you want a copy of it? Thank you. She's our manager of the transit service district.
And then what's the other one, Louise?
There should be a management letter and the communication to the governing body.
Right. And so the reason
I
that
passed mine off.
the reason that we had to issue 2 pieces of separate stapled paper as opposed to 1 for the main county report is purely procedural and legal. And that's because the county had the federal audit, so those findings get put in that more formalized form that we just talked about on pages 128 through 131. Here, it's just in a separate management letter. But it's the same finding, the one that applied to the transit district. Obviously, transit district didn't have federal funds that we audited that year, so they're off the hook for that. And then the board letter is the same board letter that the county got, although this one has the same types of best practices. The reason why is because it's administered the same way as far as the accounting is concerned. So we as auditors, when we're looking at it, we're looking at how it's being accounted for with the accounting system, but with the accounting staff, those internal controls. And because it's a sub-fund within the same, there's not going to be a difference in findings. So there's nothing really that needs to be reviewed here in detail, I don't think, because it's the exact same information we just talked about. However, if you did have any specific questions, I'm happy to address those. But yeah, it's my understanding all best practices you'll see in the board letter and the significant deficiency you'll see on the management letter are the same ones word for word that we just talked about.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Commissioner Huxley?
Quite a few, in going through some of the numbers. And
Okay.
I can give you page numbers, but if that would help, on the county net position.
Okay.
And the liability, which is on page 9.
Mm-hmm.
There was
So that page 9 is within the management's discussion and analysis. That's not actually the audited financials that we
okay. So you wouldn't
put an opinion on.
You wouldn't really.
However, what
The one
page
to
9
answer
is
that
saying is it's
question.
talking about the statement of net position on page 21. So I can still probably
Well, it was
help
a
a
very
bit.
large in the net pension liability.
Oh,
Huge-
yes, uh-huh.
Huge change.
Yeah. So for folks,
$5.5 million to over 13 million.
you're hitting on something that's been the subject of a number of debates, so much so that this was actually the Supreme Court case in the state of Oregon, the Morrow case that happened a few years ago was exactly about this. It's confusing. It is obtuse, but I will try to happily navigate you through some of the most basic points without putting anyone to sleep too much. I am an auditor. I apologize. Okay, so I think that the table on page 47 gives a really great snapshot into why these things are so volatile and so insane, for lack of a better word. The reason that the GASB 68, by the way, GASB 68 is PERS liabilities. That's what we're dealing with here is PERS liabilities. So PERS liabilities very much depend on actuarial valuations. You literally have an actuary from like an insurance agency, in this case it's Milliman for the state of Oregon, that's trying to figure out how old people are going to get, how sick they're going to get, you know, things that no one can know. So the best they can do is some fairly advanced and also up for debate math, the same way that stocks get valued for the future. If everybody actually knew how that stuff worked, well, the stock market wouldn't have as much value as it does. Anyway, page 47, that very first table that you see there, it shows 3 different interest rates and how it would affect that net pension liability. So the rate that was used was 7.5, and that translates to a $13 million liability. If you change 1% in either direction, look at that swing. It's insane. That is what you're up against. It's what the state's up against. This is not just a state problem, this is a national problem. And the whole reason, I think you know this, that GASB 68 had to happen and folks wanted to put this on the books was because of Detroit. When one of the largest cities in the nation goes belly up and nobody saw it coming, people tend to want to figure out what they can do to put some type of liability on the books. So this was the best option that folks had at the upper levels of GASB at the federal level. So they said, let's try to put these liabilities on the books. Let's disclose in the financials that these numbers are subject to wide and insane amounts of swing, but we'll just do the best we can to say this is what it could be and this is the range. So you're absolutely right to be concerned that you're seeing such a big fluctuation, and this is the reason. It's crystal ball math, it's actuaries trying to figure out how old people are going to get, how sick they're going to get, how long they're going to live. These are things that are fundamentally unknowable, but they're doing their best.
Well,
at least that's what the actuary would say, right?
For the past 2 biennium, just the PERS, just the county contribution rate of gross payroll has increased.
Correct.
Close to 10%.
Yeah, I mean, this
8% and maybe 9. It may even be 10 by the time that the end of the year comes around. So that's a huge.
I agree with you completely. It's absolutely astronomical. So much so that, you know, the governor put together a special task force to try to, you know, look into selling off state assets and doing other really radical things to try to deal with these PERS liabilities.
Not radical.
Okay, well, I should be careful with the political
okay.
ramifications of the term radical. I meant radical from a fiscal point of view. You're absolutely correct. Thank you for that observation and correction. Anything else? Because, yeah, that's a great point.
Okay, hearing no other questions, we're going to move on. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Okay, next we've got administrative actions and appointments. First of all, the Public Transit Service District. Catherine Bernhardt, is she here? She is.
Thank you for having me. My name is Catherine Bernhardt. I'm the General Manager of Curry Public Transit Incorporated. We have a new opportunity to spend money. We have been told that the new STIF, State Transportation Improvement Fund, has been approved by the state, and now we as a vendor and you as the county are responsible for making determinations on how to spend that money. So it's going to it's based upon a tax. This is there's 3 portions to it, but this is the one I'm talking about. We'll be getting approximately $150,000 a year. That's new money, and it's meant to improve and expand public transportation in the county. It's the first time we've had the opportunity to do this, so we're pretty excited about it.
Is that just in rural areas, or
Just in rural areas. This is the portion of it. There's actually 3 portions to the money that's available. This is the one that's guaranteed by the tax. There's also 2 competitive funds, which we'll be using mostly to increase our bus service, our buses inventory. So today I'm appearing in front of you. I do have a packet of information that I'd like to hand out to the board, if I could. To ask you to, 1, dissolve the current STF committee. That is the committee that we have been using to spend the state It's the fund that comes, it's guaranteed to us. It's $67,000 a year. And we almost always use that for dial-a-ride services. It's mostly for seniors and disability people. So we do not need that anymore because we want to combine that STF with the new STIP advisory committee. These two committees overlap in purpose and function. One is focused on seniors and persons with disabilities, which is the STF funds. The new one is focused on low-income people. And as you know, a lot of our seniors and people with disabilities are also low-income. So it's advisable to combine these two committees to one committee. Plus, it's a lot easier to get people to volunteer for one committee than two.
Okay, so the second one was called STIF?
Yes, it's State Transportation Improvement Fund. It's based on HB, House Bill 2017 that was passed last year.
You're good.
Everybody knows of this STIF program, I think.
STIF it's called. It's a bad name.
Okay, so that's one of the motions you want, to combine those two committees.
Yes, we need to dissolve the STF committee, which was formed in 2006. We need to appoint or approve the bylaws for the new joint committee, and then we need to appoint committee members.
The motions are on page 267 on the packet that we would need to go forward with.
I think everybody's had a chance to read their packets, so why don't we...
I did have...
A question? Sure.
Kathy, before we... How many board members? I looked and I looked and
I did the same thing. Couldn't find it.
How many board members? I didn't see a number. I mean, we had a lot of applicants, and I think there were even additional applications.
For the Commissioners Board?
No, well, the point, I'm sorry, board members, I should say committee members, not board members.
We're proposing right now, we have 6 people volunteer to join this joint committee, and I have in mind 2 others, plus the commissioners need to appoint one of you to be a voting member of this committee. That's part of the bylaws.
So is the committee size addressed in the bylaws?
It is. It's 5 to 9.
Okay, so you're proposing...
Right now we have 6 volunteers. I'm hoping to get 7 or maybe 8. But we don't have the other 2 applications.
But all of those who
yet.
Turned in their applications...
They have, and they're in your packet.
And yeah, I got those. But I'm with Commissioner Huxley. I was looking, do we have too many applicants? Or
So what number
no, we
are you
actually
proposing?
have not enough.
What number are you
Right
proposing?
now we have 6. I would like to have 7. If we can get one of the commissioners to be on board, that's my 7.
So you're proposing a committee of 7?
That's correct.
Okay, that was my
Would you expand
question.
it to 9 if I
We would, if we could get volunteers.
You might expand it to 9 if she had 2 more.
Yeah.
So.
Actually, I have a gentleman from Port Orford, and I would like to have a Port Orford representative on there because we'd like to have the 3 major cities represented. Right now we have Brookings and Gold Beach, but not Port Orford.
So when are your meetings?
We have not determined meeting dates yet. They're stipulated in the bylaws to be twice a year, but this first year it's going to be often because we have to come up with a plan, an actual, very formalized plan on how to spend this money. So I anticipate having at least 4 meetings before November 1st. My due date for proposing this plan to spend the money for 2019-2020 is November 1st.
In your board packet on page 273, it says number and qualifications and selections of members. The committee shall consist of no less than 5 and no more than 9 members appointed directly by the commissioners, and it gives the qualifications for the members there. So,
Okay, I was searching, but you found it. Good.
yeah. So you'll end up with appointing the members that have made applications, and in the future, if
We'll
we end up
propose
with 1 or
other
2
members.
more members that the board feels are appropriate for this committee, you'll appoint more.
Okay.
And I actually have the names and the terms of these members, if you'd like me to go over that, because the first set of members have to be staggered. There have to be some that are 3, some that are 2, so that we have an ongoing board. So if you'd like me to go over their names and their qualifications and how they qualify to be a member.
I think that was all in the applications.
Okay, the
So I
terms
think-
are not though, so.
Okay. So why don't you
Well-
go over the names and the terms?
Okay. Joanne Wasbauer, 3-year. Catherine Bernhardt.
What position? So what position is she?
She qualifies as over 60.
No, I'm sorry, but good. So a lot of times, what helps us, so we don't say this is the Catherine, Bernhardt position. We say position number 1, is a 3-year position, and so then when we track them and find out which positions need to be replaced, then we can have. So I think we should have numbers on the positions and say what they are, and then that'll help us when terms expire and we need to reappoint. Sorry for the interruption.
Oh, that's okay. So position number 1 would be Joanne Wasbauer. I'm proposing her for a 3-year term. Position number 2 would be Bill Hamilton. I'm proposing him for a 2-year term. Number 3 would be Catherine Bernhardt, a 3-year term. Number 4 would be Beth Barker Hidalgo for a 2-year term. Number 5 would be Tom Olson for a 3-year term. And number 6 would be Kim Jones for a 2-year term. That gives me half and half for 3 and 2 years.
Okay.
JJ, did you get that down?
I want to review the video.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I can give you a synopsis of it.
We appreciate that, thank you.
Okay, so what I handed out to you is a kind of a synopsis of what the boards needs to do and what Curry Public Transit needs to do. And it's pretty clear. Number 1 is we need to review those bylaws, which have already been proposed to you, and the commissioners need to approve those bylaws for us. Number 2 is we need to appoint the committee, which I just went over, and I've already recruited members, and the Board of Commissioners needs to approve those members. Number 3 actually goes into the actual plan, and number 4 into the actual plan, and that's all up to our advisory committee. So that's something that we'll be doing hopefully in the next 2 months.
So do you want some motions to that effect so that we can
Yes,
get you
please.
going on that?
Yes.
Okay,
I
so do I have a motion to approve the bylaws? No?
Move to dissolve the current combined transit
Oh,
service
I'm sorry.
district and STF advisory.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second, and that just for the record, that's on 6A I, to dissolve the current, or the committee.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
dissolve
that's
the
what
current
we're
committee.
that's what we're motioning to
Yes.
approve right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Got to get back on track here. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the question.
Aye.
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 I do, Chair, have a question on the documentation that we're signing. Is this an order? Is this a resolution?
The original
county.
documentation was, it's right here, it looks like an order.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I have one.
What page? What is it in the packet?
I would have to look
I
at
just
that.
didn't. That's the reason I'm. What are we?
We can develop a.
I don't think so.
After the vote, we can, if we've been directed to, we'll have an order directed and then signed by the.
But there was one, adopted. See, and on page 278 of 398, and that's the reason for my questions. This is on the committee bylaws, but this is not, I don't think, dissolving. I think this is approving. I think.
The first thing we need to do is get rid of the old
I agree.
committee.
I agree. I agree. And I'm just trying to
think we
follow
just-
through on the documentation.
Yes.
What are we? It's one thing to make a motion, but then what document are we talking about?
Commissioner Huxley, Louise Kallstrom, I'm county accountant. She handed me the order that established that committee, and I just handed that to the council, and he's probably looking up that order right now.
Well, no, we established the committee that we're contemplating dissolving by an order, and so then you would dissolve that committee by an order. And if you're saying there's not an order in the packet, that is something we can create during the lunch recess and bring it back for approval after the lunch recess. And it sounds like we'll probably need a few orders to that effect.
I'm trying to see what then the document with signature lines on page 278 of 398 is.
So with that, I believe 278 of 398, that I believe is the Curry County Transit Advisory Committee bylaws, which would be adopted, I think, last after you create the committee. And then the interesting part there is you all are the board of the transit district, so you could create basically the rules, and that's what establishes. That's where Administrator Schroeder was saying this establishes the number of committee members and what their qualifications are and when they serve for. So that would be adopted by the board. You'd be adopting the bylaws of the committee, and it has your signatures there, as you said, Commissioner Huxley, on page 278. So that's establishing basically the operating rules.
The bylaws.
Yep, the operating rules for the new committee. And then I think once you have the operating rules established, then you appoint the members of the new committee. Now we haven't appointed the members of the new committee yet.
No.
Now, Clark Schroeder, you also mentioned it seemed like when we first started this, you said there were some items or orders for them to do in the packet. Maybe I'm misremembering, but when we said we had three actions to take, and you said those can be found. I thought you said they could be found somewhere in the packet.
I was talking about the motions that could be made. That was on the agenda routing slip, which the three motions that have to be made for this.
Got it.
I did not develop any orders for that. I guess I thought that the motions would suffice.
I tell you what. So in the AGRSs, are there three different AGRSs or one describing the
Just
three
one.
items? Oh, I see, and that's there on page 267. Good. So here's what we can do. We're getting to the noon hour. It might make sense to go into recess. We'll put up some orders. We'll look at this order. We'll rescind this order, and we can come back and get those done after lunch if that's the will of the board.
We can't get this done right now?
I can't run out and get the orders done, is what I'm saying, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Are you able to stay over the lunch hour?
Well, I don't know if you need to stay for us to do that.
It's totally up to you. I can stay. I have my own board meeting at 2 o'clock, so I've got to get out of here.
Oh, we'll get you out of there here by then.
Well, I'm wondering if the board needs any further information to consider the actions.
Well, I'll just let you know,
I
I
don't
would be
think
happy
so.
as a commissioner to
All we really
serve
need
on that board.
are the documents.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate
All we
that.
need are the documents. And then...
So we're motioning second and approving something that exists
Correct.
that we
And
know.
so
Correct.
you've heard the item, so then we'll prepare you something. We'll also prepare you, I believe, a document that will have the appointments, the positions, all that stuff. You know what I'm saying? That she went over who's going to be what position, what function they're filling. And then, Kathy, I think after you get that to me and JJ over the lunch break, then you can go and then we'll just bring back the things that we've talked about in written form for the board to act on after lunch.
Mr. Boyce?
Ms. Barnett, it's been a pleasure to work with you the last couple of years, and I'd be happy to also serve on the board. Where are your meetings generally?
By the bylaws stipulation, they have to be either in Brookings, Gold Beach, or Port Orford.
Okay.
They have to be on Alafang, and they have to be during a time where our transit can actually get people to those meetings.
Terrific job, Miss. Terrific job. Thank you.
So I'm
Ready for a
anticipating
recess?
varying them where we are.
Do we want to make this a little longer than an hour to give you or John time to, or Clark
Give you an
time to
extra
do
2
this?
minutes.
So here's something that's interesting, because when you look at the agenda, and maybe we've made some odd amendment without knowing it, but my agenda shows a 1 p.m. public hearing on the supplemental budgets that we had. We opened and
already
closed
had
at
the
10:30.
Yeah.
So if you want to give us to 1:15, that would be fine. But I don't, again, it's word processing. We have other orders. I think I can knock it out at the over the lunch hour. But if we, the odd part is if we did notice that, you know, if our agenda went out with a notice of that hearing at 1 o'clock, we.
The newspaper publication said 10:30.
Thank
That
you.
took precedent over.
Thank you.
Well, we already had the public hearing,
Very
and
good.
now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty
I would
after
just
lunch.
say as a cautionary, just come back at 1, since somewhere there's some information out there on our website, something, agenda is telling people at 1 o'clock we're going to do something. I think when we come back at 1, it makes the most sense.
Okay, so this meeting will be recessed until 1 o'clock. Thank you so much for coming.
Would you like me to stay until 1, or do I need to be here?
I don't think so. It looks like we've got everything for you. I think you need to talk to
Yep,
Council
Kathy,
Huddle first.
JJ and I just need you to make sure we get it right on our appointing order.
I'll come and see you.
Thank you.
And thank you very much.
Thank you.